Welcome back. Thank you for staying with us. This is Brighter Morning with Bo, and I'm Bo Tiwari. And you are watching on MCTV, Multicultural TV, and listening on U97.5 FM radio. Our next guest is Professor Christine Carrington, and we will be with her shortly, as soon as we have her online. And we will talk with her about a number of issues surrounding COVID. And she's a very delightful person and a good academic and researcher. And we will hear her in a few minutes. We will talk with her. I just wanted to mention, as I usually do, news that are important to you as citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. And two things I want to mention is, first of all, the virus is very much with us. We had 6 deaths yesterday and 270 new cases. We don't know what the numbers will be at the end of today. But that just tells us that, look, we're living with this thing, and it is something that we have to continue to manage. And secondly, I want to indicate to you that there are several vaccines available and that you should really make the effort to get the vaccination. I think the authorities are making it as easy as possible for people to get the vaccination, to get vaccinated, taking it to the communities and so on. And you should really try to do it. You can go to a health center, you can go to other places in order to get the vaccine. And the important point I want to make has to do with another country, which is Guyana. And Guyana, as you know, has come into significant oil wealth after having a very rough time for many, many years. That was a country that was economically very depressed, could not see growth. They put their faith in things like agriculture, forestry, mining, and they were able to develop those elements of the economy. You had a significant number of investment from Trinidad and Tobago there, even in the rough times. I would say 2 major corporations in Trinidad invested there very early. That was Massey Limited and Ansa Macal, and they have stayed in Guyana during the rough times, and they are likely to be able to benefit during the good times. And also Republic Bank invested in Guyana about a decade ago, might be more, and they are very much present there in Guyana as well. But the news that I want to give you is that Guyana has set up what they are calling a natural resources fund, which is very much akin to our heritage and stabilization fund, and very much akin to sovereign funds created by other countries. And what they are going to do before the end of the year is to put in $500 million US worth of deposits in that fund. So they are beginning to do that. So if they do that over the next 10 years, even at that level, 500 million, they will have a good fund in 10 years, almost equivalent to ours. And if they keep doing that systematically, and they have oil and natural gas for a long time, and if they keep saving, it will make a big difference. You know, when the Prime Minister was on my program, I asked him what does he think that one of the mistakes was that we might have made, and he said that one of the mistakes is that we perhaps didn't save enough during the times that we had plenty. And I think Guyana is learning from that mistake. The former President Jagdeo made a statement recently in Guyana indicating that basically using an example, Trinidad and Tobago as an example, as a country that had significant oil wealth but did not use savings of that oil wealth judiciously. And it's terrible to be talked about like that as a country. It doesn't make me feel good. But the point is that Guyana is now putting money into the Natural Resources Fund in order to help develop the country, but also to create a savings and a buffer for times of difficulty that inevitably come to any country. No country does well forever. You go up and down, and you just have to manage the process. That's the reality of governance. So I want to ask Christine Carrington, Professor Christine Carrington, to join me now, and we'll begin a conversation with her on what's happening really in research and health. How are you?
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning to you. It's so delightful to see you. I haven't seen you
for a long time
in person. I've seen you on television, of course, when you've appeared to explain certain things or to talk about research or to talk about the virus or the variant. But I must say you look well, and it really is good. It's a breath of fresh air to talk to you.
Thank you.
I've spoken to you a long time. So tell me, before we get into anything, tell me a little bit about your work and what your work involves now.
Okay, so as you know, my background is in virology. I have been with the University of the West Indies for, must be about 25 years now. And I have always worked on viruses. My focus has been on virus evolution. And in particular, I'm interested in the factors that are involved in determining the emergence of viruses. So why do viruses emerge into human populations, how they spread in populations, and how they're maintained? And those factors include both sort of evolutionary factors, like changes in the virus, as well as changes in the environment. And right now, what we're doing is working very closely with the Caribbean Public Health Agency and the Ministry of Health on what we call genome sequencing of SARS-CoV-2 samples, COVID-19 samples from COVID-19 patients, to be able to screen for variants of concern and look for any other, emerging variants, etc.
Okay. Is the Delta variant with us in the population? Do we know for sure?
Okay, so the Delta variant has been detected in individuals who were quarantined. So we've seen 6 cases.
Volume?
So far, we have no evidence of community spread of Delta variant.
Okay. What about other variants? I mean, I'm not a scientist, and I don't know the kind of complex research work that you do. But from what I've read, it has been stated that if you have large numbers of unvaccinated within a population, it is possible for variants to emerge within that population.
Yes.
Have you been able to detect anything about that?
Yes. So the background to this is that viruses replicate multiply inside of the cells of an organism. And when they multiply, you can get errors being made, and those errors, we call them mutations. And sometimes, occasionally, those mutations result in changes in the characteristics of the virus. It's a minority of times that occurs. The variants that you hear about, these variants of concern, variants of the virus that have acquired the properties, for example, to spread more quickly, some of them maybe to cause more severe disease, or to be less sensitive to the vaccine. So they're of concern, they're of public health concern. There are 4 variants of concern recognized by the WHO: Alpha, Beta, Gamma, and Delta. We have detected Alpha, Gamma, and Delta in samples from Trinidad and Tobago. However, to date, the only one for which we have evidence of community spread is the Gamma variant. That's the one we used to call P1. that first emerged in Brazil. So yes, we do have variants in Trinidad. There are also other variants which are referred to as variants of interest. And these are variants which have characteristics that are concerning, or evidence of characteristics which are concerning, but there's still more research that needs to be done to confirm that these viruses are actually of some significance. We haven't detected any of those yet in Trinidad.
Okay. I mean, you said you detected the Brazilian variant here. Have we, from your knowledge, taken measures to manage and contain that? And if so, what are some of the things that we are doing?
Okay, so as I mentioned initially, the variants, they arise, new variants arise as a result of viral replication in infected individuals. Okay?
Yes.
So the way to control, and the only way they can spread is by going from person to person.
Person, yes.
So exactly the same measures that you put in place for any SARS-CoV-2, anything that stops transmission or reduces transmission is useful in containing variants. So yes, we do have things in place to protect us against these variants, but it's up to us to implement them. So for example, vaccination is a very important one. Vaccinated people are, one, less likely to get infected, and two, they can get infected, but it's much less likely. And if they are infected, in addition to being protected against severe disease and death, right, having a much lower risk of that, they are also less likely to transfer the virus, to transmit the virus to others. It can happen, but they are much less likely. So having vaccinated people in the population, as many as possible, can reduce transmission and hinder the variant as well. Okay?
Knowing what you know about how these variants can emerge and how quickly they can spread, are you satisfied with the level of vaccination that we have been able to achieve so far? I mean, I must tell you that I am disappointed. I thought we would have crossed 600 like nearly a month ago. Yeah. And I thought that the hesitancy would only have arisen when we got into about 700-800. And I am deeply distressed that there is so much hesitancy at 400, 500, you know?
Yes, well, I am disappointed as well. I would really, the vaccines are there. They're available for people to take. They have been made very easily available from a range of different sources. And so it's really disappointing that people are not taking it up. I think a lot of it has to do, as we know, a lot of the hesitancy has to do with the misinformation that people receive. There's a lot of false information, misleading information online. And people need to stick to sources, to reliable sources for information. And the vaccines we have are safe and effective, and we really need more people to just go out and get vaccinated. I'm vaccinated, my husband, my children, my parents, from age 12 all the way up to, 87, my aunt, all vaccinated with no problems.
Okay, if you had to say a few things based on your knowledge that would help a person who is hesitant to make a decision, that final decision to go and get vaccinated, what would those things be? Just maybe two or three things. Yeah.
Well, first of all, people need to understand that their immune systems, we have an immune system that is designed, well, it has evolved or designed, whatever, however you want to look at it, to fight foreign invaders in our body.
Yes.
Okay, and viruses are foreign invaders. Now, when you get infected by a virus, your immune system is meeting it for the first time, and it takes time for it to fight that virus. It takes time for it to learn about it, to create the tools it needs, and sometimes the virus gets the advantage. I mean, in 1 in 5 cases, the virus gets the advantage and you have severe disease. So what I want to tell people is that what vaccines do is basically introduce your immune system to what the virus looks like. It sort of gives you a glimpse of the virus so that your immune system can prepare all the tools. In fact, your immune system fights the virus instead of fighting fights the vaccine instead of fighting the virus, and makes all the tools you need so that if you do get infected, your immune system is prepared. People always ask, how can I sort of boost my immune system to fight the virus? The answer is to take a vaccine. The vaccine prepares your immune system.
So some of the reactions that people have to vaccines, and that is often to the person who hasn't yet taken the vaccine a source of fear. That is just your immune system responding to the vaccine that is introduced into their system to be better prepared as a full-fledged army to deal with the virus if it comes.
Yes, and another thing that keeps people back is they have this idea that the vaccine goes into their body and it stays there. When in fact what happens is that the vaccine goes in and the vaccine is seen as foreign by your immune system. And your immune system fights it off. So the vaccine doesn't stay. It doesn't last very long, a few days. What lasts is that prepared army of immune cells and immune tools that can fight SARS-CoV-2, should you see it again. It just really gives your immune system the advantage over the virus. This is why we see that vaccinated people are less likely to get sick, less likely to end up in hospital, less likely to die, because their immune systems are primed for that enemy.
So the vaccines are a way of preparing for the virus or any variant of it.
That's right.
In such a way that even if you get it, you can deal with it.
That's right. So the other misconception people have is that vaccines protect against, they're sort of made to protect against infection.
Infections.
Infection and disease are two different things. Infection is when the virus gets into your body and starts to replicate, starts to multiply. Disease is the consequences of that. So that's when you feel sick. Yeah. So the vaccines were all designed to prevent disease. So when you hear about, vaccinated people are getting infected, that is not unexpected. The fact that they get infected less often is actually a bonus.
Yes.
The point of the vaccine is to prevent the disease. And even against the variants, which they were, that's a slightly different opponent than the vaccine was designed for, even against them, they work well enough to prevent severe disease and death. All right? So it reduces the chance of those outcomes. All right? So it really is worthwhile.
So we've had the Brazilian variant with us, but we've been able to manage that well. There seems to be a significant fear, perhaps because of what has transpired in the United Kingdom and also in what is transpiring now in the United States now, where they have the Delta variant as dominant. There seems to be a significant fear that if the Delta variant gets into the population of Trinidad and Tobago, it can cause havoc here in Trinidad and Tobago. And we've done well so far to kind of trap it in the airport and to contain it and that kind of thing. In your view, from my limited understanding of these things, it seems to me inevitable that it's going to get here. Is there anything that we can do in the meanwhile? And secondly, what do we do? Are we prepared if it gets here? And I'm going to ask you a third question, but I want you to explore those two. Yeah.
So the Delta variant has become dominant all around the world. So there is no doubt that it will eventually get into Trinidad and Tobago.
So it's coming, yes.
It's coming. The thing is that one of the key things about it is that it spreads much more quickly. So all of the sort of interventions that we have, the non-pharmacological interventions, everything but vaccines, and right, all of those interventions that we use to suppress transmission, to reduce person-to-person interactions, if the Delta variant is present, because it spreads more easily, right? And the reason it does that is because apparently the amounts of virus in your body go up much faster and last longer. So your people are infectious for longer. So instead of one person infecting on average 2 to 3 people, they can infect on average, so let's say 4 to 8 people. So you have to have much stronger public health interventions. This is like, a friend of mine gave me an analogy. It's like trying to go down an up escalator. So the interventions we have are trying to force the virus down, and the virus is coming up. And with Delta, because it spreads much more quickly, you have to walk much faster down to get off that escalator. A lot more work. So it is a problem. It's associated with more severe disease. It seems to be affecting children, whether that is a sort of result of which parts of the population are more observant of the interventions or who have been vaccinated. That's not clear, but children are at risk. And really, if we want to continue to open up the economy in the face of something like Delta, we really have to get vaccinated, because even if the virus comes and it spreads, it means that we are not going to be getting sick, not as many people be getting sick. We won't be overwhelming the hospitals. We won't have to close down. All right.
Yeah.
So,
we on the economic side, we are moving to greater and greater opening up. I imagine we're going to have restaurants opening just now. I imagine pretty soon we're going to have beaches, even if it is managed in some way. I imagine eventually the bars are going to be opening up. Suppose we do all of these things and suddenly now the Delta variant comes here. We might be preparing now for how to deal with it. But if that happens, don't we have a pretty deadly situation there that could threaten to take us back to lockdown if we do not manage this business of how fast we get the vaccines, and if we do not manage the business of what the government is calling safe zones?
Okay, so there's a lot of sort of policy things you've brought in there that I am not, I don't have all the information from all this.
I'm only asking you the medical side. I don't want to compromise you
scientific,
at all. Scientific,
not even medical. I'm not a medical doctor.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you the scientific side.
So basically, if you have a virus, anytime you have a situation where there is easier spread of the virus, you're going to get an explosion in cases, all right? So the only way to open up to what state that we were before is to have a situation where people are safe because they have immunity to the virus.
Yes. So that is vaccination.
Yeah, and there's vaccination. There's actually 2 ways to gain immunity. One is to get sick. to get the virus and get sick. And we care about people. We don't want people to die. We don't want people in the hospital. We don't want other people to suffer because the hospitals are overwhelmed. So for me, that is not an option, right? The safe option, the responsible option is vaccination. Okay. That's how you get immunity without disease.
Okay, and do you feel that it is desirable in a situation in which you really want to control the spread to ensure that where people are gathering for whatever reason, even under conditions of safe protocol, that a distinction be made between vaccinated and unvaccinated? If you do not wish to answer that because you do not want to get into policy decisions, but I'm really asking you from a scientific point of view, understanding the spread, would you say that would be desirable?
Okay, so what I'll repeat is that, mention is that viruses are peculiar,
Yes.
in that they can only replicate inside the cells, the sort of building blocks, the units that we're made up of.
Yes.
They can only multiply inside the cells of a living organism.
Sure.
And in our case, it's the cells of a human spreading to another human, okay? So there's no sort of virus replicating out in the environment. It's all about interactions between people.
Yes.
Virus going from one person to another. If you want to limit the virus, you have to limit that type of transmission, right? That can be done by physically keeping people apart, as we have done over the past year and a half, or it can be done through anything that reduces transmission. For example, as I mentioned, vaccination reduces the chance of infection, of a productive infection, and it reduces the chance of transmission. So vaccinated people, if you have pools of vaccinated people interacting together, there is less chance of transmission among them than if you have a pool of unvaccinated people.
Or a mix.
Or a mix.
Or a mix.
Yeah, because once you get the presence of unvaccinated people increases the chance of the virus being transmitted.
All right. No, well, you're very clear. Thank you. I just wanted to, this morning I saw something in which the Minister of Education indicated that about 1/3 of the students have taken the opportunity to become vaccinated. Now I find that very troubling, because I mean my children are big now, so I have no worries there. But I mean I have grandchildren, and they are vaccinated, and I mean 1/3 of the students are vaccinated. We also have that problem with teachers now, in which it seems that there's a policy of not asking a teacher whether they're vaccinated or not. Is that a problematic situation for us, you think?
Well, certainly if you don't have, as I said, if you have a large pool of unvaccinated people, you increase the chance of the virus spreading.
Yes.
I do think that it is important for children to get vaccinated as well. Although children are at lower risk of the severe manifestations and at lower risk of death from COVID-19, it can happen. So they are at lower risk, but not at no risk. And they too can spread the virus.
Sure.
So,
but they seem to be at higher risk for the Delta variant, though.
Not at higher risk than adults. So,
okay.
Yes. So they're at risk of infection, and they transmit just like everybody else.
Yes.
Okay. But children have a lower risk of severe disease.
Yes.
However, very important, they are not at no risk of severe disease. There are children who end up in hospital. I think in the US, the hospitalization rate for children is about 1 in 50, 1 in 1,000 or something like that, compared to severe disease in sort of overall is about 1 in 5. You will get 1 in 5 people having severe disease. So the children are at lower risk, but it is still a risk. And a child in a hospital with a disease where a condition where people can't interact with them and hug them and sit with them and stay with them is that's traumatizing for a child.
That's very tough.
And I wouldn't wish it on any child.
Yeah, and I would say to parents, please don't. I mean, you don't want to put your child in that situation, Put
yourself in that situation as well. Being away from your child while they're sick is not easy.
Yes, because it is very traumatic for the parent as well to be in that position.
And the child.
So, all right. Well, okay. Those are. I think, Professor Carrington, you've cleared up a number of very, very important issues, and the important thing about what you are doing is that you are clearing it up from a scientific and research knowledge point of view. This is not old talk. This is not opinion. This is on the basis of the science that is available, the science that you know, the experience scientifically of what has transpired in other countries and what has been written about, and applying that knowledge to our own situation here in Trinidad and Tobago. So we need to mass vaccinate as quickly as we can. We need to create the conditions in which you do not have large numbers of unvaccinated, which leaves your population exposed. And we need to have a situation in which we are not really freely mixing vaccinated and unvaccinated, especially if we get the Delta virus in Trinidad and Tobago, which we are saying is an inevitability. It's a matter of time, it's going to get here. Now, one of my concerns, and this was the third question, was if the Delta variant gets in Tobago. Tobago is extremely under-vaccinated. It is a population of 60,000 people. It is, as you know, it's a very close-knit community. People interact all the time. I mean, they live in villages. Tobago is a series of villages, except for Scarborough. And I mean, is there a kind of imperative for Tobagonians really to step up the rate of vaccination there now? I mean, is that a necessity, and especially in the schools?
I mean, throughout Trinidad and Tobago, we need more people to get vaccinated. We don't have to look, sort of imagine what will happen if the virus takes off. We have seen through our own experience what happens when we have a surge and we see people dying. We see the hospitals approaching, their level of occupancy that is troubling. We can look at other countries and we can see what the consequences are of this virus, whether it's a variant or not, spreading through an unvaccinated population. 20% of people are going to get severe disease, and 1 in 50 people are going to die.
So
right?
those are what
in an unvaccinated population. That's across the world.
That's what the statistics show.
Those are the statistics. Between
1 in 50 will die, and 20% will get
severe disease.
Severe disease. That is quite significant, though.
Yeah.
I mean, in a small country like ours, if that were to happen, we would be in a lot of trouble.
Well, we've already had, our case fatality rate is around 2%, 2 to 3%, which is, between 1 and 3% is what they see around the world. So yeah. It's not that like we're not immune. I don't know why people have to actually, know somebody personally who has died to realize that this is a serious matter, or somebody who has been in hospital. We can look on the television and see it happening in other countries. We know from our own experience. We read about it. It's hard to understand why people really have. It's like you have to see it for yourself. You have to experience it for yourself. Get out of there. Get vaccinated.
Yes. Okay. I want to go into one area now because of the fact that we had closed the airport, but now we opened up, and we are going to have more and more airlines coming in and out eventually. Tell me what happens to the level of risk from a scientific point of view of the airport opening up and more flights and more airlines coming in from more destinations to Trinidad and Tobago, first of all, and what is the risk for Trinidadians now traveling to other places and coming back home in terms of its impact on the possibilities of infection in Trinidad and Tobago?
Well, you would know better than me that no country can remain in isolation and lockdown forever.
Right.
So we have to open up eventually, and the rate at which you do it is dictated by a lot of factors that I don't have access to. But there is SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19, is present in all countries in the world. Delta variant is dominant. So amongst the people entering the country, you will have people who are infected. Now, we try to reduce the chance of these infected people coming in and the chance of those infected people, if they do arrive, of them spreading to other people. We put all these things in place. We make them do test them in advance. The unvaccinated ones, they would be, quarantined. If you're vaccinated, you already have a lower risk. So you have all these different interventions. So those work to reduce risk. But when you increase the number of people, your risk goes up. So at the same time, what you want to be doing is trying to get your population vaccinated. It's a balancing act.
Yes.
Our strategy for the past year and a half has been to hide from the virus.
Yes.
All right?
Yeah,
and
stay
we
home.
can't do that forever.
Oh, yeah,
we need to, I like to tell people, you mentioned the immune system as an army, which the immune system, your immune system is an army, the virus is the enemy.
Yes.
Right? And for the past year, we've been hiding from the enemy. Now we need to put on our suit of armor, which is the vaccine, and go out and meet the enemy.
Yes,
right?
I talked about the airport because I just want to emphasize to the population that is listening and watching that the more you move your economy to try to restore it to revival, the greater is the risk each time.
Yes.
And the question is, how do you protect yourself from it? And you are saying, well, yes, we hid for a long time, we'd stay home, we'll be cautious about going in the grocery and all these kinds of things. But life has to go on. And these attendant increasing risks are appearing anyway because you have to open up the economy.
That's right.
So people are traveling and they are going outside, they're coming back, they might bring the virus with them.
Yes.
People are coming from all destinations outside eventually. Some of them are going to bring the virus with them. And the only protection for that increasing level of risk that arises with your opening up the economy and your society more and more is vaccination.
That's right.
There is no other alternative.
Yeah. Might I add
yes,
that the risk is not just from people coming into the country, and I mean, yes, that's how we get new, that's feeding into the system.
Yes.
But there's also risk within the system.
Yes.
All right. So, we need to open up internally as well. As we said, the children need to go back to school. People need to go back to their offices. I'm still working largely remotely. So we need that opening up is internal and external. And if we're going to open up to the larger risk of infection, we have to reduce the risk of disease associated with that infection. And that's what we get from vaccination, and reduce the risk of transmission and further propagation, which we get from vaccination as well.
Yes, and if we don't manage the opening up in order to reduce the risks, which are increasing all around us as numbers, larger and larger numbers are able to access places and destinations and services, etc., then that in itself contributes to the process if the vaccination rate does not go up. Okay, I want to thank you for spending your time with us this morning. I can't say how valuable I think this interview has been in terms of trying to look at the problem from a research and science and the availability of knowledge on science point of view that you have brought. I really, really value that, and I think it's important. As I said, what you are talking about is not based on opinion, and if it's opinion, it's informed opinion based on knowledge and research. And I want to thank you for that. But I just want to deviate a little bit, and this is only my personal interest now, because of what I know of your background. I know that you were always involved in virology and so on, and I know at one time you were working on dengue. What has happened to that kind of research? Is that still very vital in Trinidad and Tobago? Is it something we've kind of been able to manage well?
Well, it's still vital, all right?
Yeah.
We've done research in the past on dengue, yellow fever, chikungunya, all these different viruses, right?
Yes.
I think what is important is to have the capacity and the sort of the expertise and the infrastructure to study what we call emerging viruses. And that's like
Yes.
SARS-CoV-2. We are going to see more and more of these viruses because of the way that we have our impact on the environment. So this disease emergence, Ebola, now we have Nipah virus, all these, it's going to continue. So yes, it's essential, even for dengue, even for, things we know about. They will come back, new viruses will come, and we need to be better prepared in future.
Okay, now this is this is not strictly science, but it's an important question about where the world is going. We've seen a situation where when this virus came out, people panicked. There's a lot of panic, but the scientific community went into research mode. Governments put money behind it. Private sector put money behind it, and we were able to get a vaccine in record time. But most of the vaccinations that emerged as partial solutions to the problem were developed by scientists in developed countries, in industrialized countries. It is only South Korea on the one hand, I think, and India on the other, and I think the third country became South Africa, that had the capacity not to find a vaccine, but to manufacture. And those things came after. Now, we know that in the world going forward, the division is going to be greater. COVID has made it very clear there are going to be wide economic gaps internally in countries. There are going to be wider economic gaps between more competitive industrialized countries and the developing world. And the question of how, the developing world does not have the capacity, as far as I can see, for dealing with these viruses that you just said, and I know because I've read about it too, which is that we have to prepare for more and more of these things. What can we as a small developing country do, and what can countries that are developing countries do to make sure that in every crisis that emerges, you are not left back in the process?
Right. Okay, so that's a big question.
That's a big knowledge question because of where you are.
Yeah. So yes, you're right. The development of the vaccines, and I'm saying development as opposed to production, has been, mainly in the developed world,
Industrialized world,
industrialized world, I should say. But there have been vaccines developed. There's one in Cuba being developed now. There's, there are other countries that are trying. They're not completed yet. So there's a lot that goes into this. There's research. Remember, you mentioned the money put in and all that. There's 20 years of research going into coronaviruses and into vaccines for coronaviruses that went into where we are today. So there's a lot of research. There's the vaccine development. There's the clinical trials. That is a specialty in itself, requiring certain conditions. Yes. And then you have the regulatory bodies that need to be active in order to ensure safety and the efficacy and stuff. And then you have the production, and then you have distribution. So there's a lot that goes into going from, a virus to a vaccine that goes in someone's arm. And obviously, I think in small countries, we obviously cannot manage all of that. Even the industrialized countries have to distribute some of that input across different regions. So we would have to do the same. We have to work together as a region There might be some parts of the region that are better suited for certain parts of the process. I think that the new the mRNA vaccines, the technology the technology involved there is very exciting in terms of the ease with which you can produce a vaccine, actually make the vaccine. So it requires less. I don't want to say less investment because I don't know the money, but it's more accessible. So there's a lot of scope for future development and for the involvement of developing lesser industrialized or less resource-limited settings to contribute to their own self-sufficiency.
Okay.
It's not going to be a easy thing. It's going to take years, but the investment has to be made. And when we keep forgetting that India produces a large amount of vaccines that go, serve a large.
That's right. Yeah, before. Yes, of course.
Yeah, so.
I find that a troubling aspect of the knowledge that came out of this experience. The fact that, we are so left back in the process, so to speak, and are so dependent.
Yeah.
And remember, there was a time we couldn't even get the vaccine here.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that there are groups of people who tried to put things in place. The Gavi and COVAX and these things, and it's just a pity that human nature doesn't work.
No, well, it's
always
the power of the
system.
You have a regional system. You have a global system that is supposed to work. But the power of individual countries doesn't allow it to work because, it's simply undermined on the basis of national self-interest.
That's
so
right.
I think this is an area, certainly in the area of health, that we've got to address globally. Anyway, I want to thank you, Professor Carrington, for being such a wonderful guest and very refreshing, really. From your perspective as a working scientist, as a producing scientist, and as an academic that is concerned with public health issues. And I want to thank you very much for being here this morning. It has been my pleasure.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
All right, then. Okay, good luck.
Okay, bye.
Good. Bye. And all of you, I hope you enjoyed that interview. And here you see where, someone in this society, they're doing their work, they're making their work valuable, they're doing it for people, they're doing it with the best interests of people at heart. And they're coming to you with straight talk. They don't have any political agenda, they don't have any agendas that are nefarious. They're just trying to tell you, look, this is what I know based on the work that I do. This is what I see. This is what I understand. This is what I think would be the best way to go. And I think you need more of that in this society. You need people who can come to this society and speak from the point of view of knowledge and tell you what they really think and what they feel are the solutions. We also had a very honest contribution from Reverend Tiluxing. I thought that he was very clear in his perspective, and I thought he was very sincere in talking to me and therefore talking to you. And I hope you found this morning's program valuable. We move on now to Andrew Chan and the news. If you get a chance today, read my article in The Guardian. It's on page 12. It's called Government is Bad Business, Give the Private Sector a Chance.